Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to sew a bustier with a keyhole neckline and a 360-degree flare with pockets. In the last video, I showed you how to draft a bustier with a keyhole neckline. If you are yet to see the video, I'm going to drop the link in the description box below so you can check that out. This is the sewing part of the video. I went ahead to transfer the patterns to fabric and I added the necessary seam allowance. The center front was cut on fold and I added 1/2 inch allowance round the pattern. And I also cut the lining piece the same way. And for the side fronts, I added 1/2 inch allowance round the pattern. Aside the side seam, I added 1.5 inches allowance to the side seam. And the yoke was cut on fold as well. And I added 1/2 inch allowance round the pattern. And for the back pattern as well, I added 1/2 inch allowance round the armhole, the shoulder line and the neckline. And I added 1.5 inches as the side seam allowance and 1.5 inches as the zipper allowance. And I added 1/2 inch allowance to the waistline to join to the down parts of my dress. So I will start joining my pieces together now. I will start by joining the center front to the side front. So I'm going to remove my patterns and I'll join my pieces together. So I'm going to place my center front to the side front, right side facing each other, and I'll make sure I use my pins to hold them down so that it can align properly. Then I'll stitch with my 1/2 inch allowance. I'll do the same thing to the lining piece also. What I have after stitching up the bustier, and I ironed my seam opened. You can see how beautiful and well-rounded the cup looks like. My next video will be on how to properly cut and pad your bustier, so you should watch out for that. So I'm going to set this aside and work on the yoke. For the yoke, the first thing I'll do now is to notch the part where the keyhole is going to stop. So I notched the dart line because that is where I stopped my own keyhole. So I notched that with 1/2 inch allowance and I removed my pattern paper. So I'll place my lining piece on it, right side facing each other, like that. Then I'll go ahead to stitch the neckline with 1/2 inch. And I'll also stitch the down part, starting from the notched point, and I'll stop at the second notched point. I'll stitch with 1/2 inch allowance. So after stitching, this is what I have. Next thing I'll do is to notch that part round. I'm going to notch it so that when I turn to the right side, the lining will not be sticking out of the fabric. So I notched the part I sew. Then I turned it to the right side through the armhole. So this is how it looks on the right side. I'll go ahead and give this a good press. So this is what I have after ironing. You can see how flat and nice it looks like. So the next thing I will do now is to join this to my bustier. So I'm going to place my yoke on the bustier, right side facing each other. So I'm going to place it starting from the armhole like that, and I will stop at the dart point like that. So I'm going to make use of my pins. I'm going to pin that down. I'll pin my yoke down to the bustier, starting from the armhole to the dart point, because that is where I stopped my keyhole from. I'll do that to the second side also. I'll pin it down from the armhole there and the dart point like that. I'll pin that down. And I'm going to place my lining piece on it, right side facing each other. Make sure you push away the remaining parts of the yoke that we are not going to be stitching. Make sure you push it out of the way. And you pin down the lining to the fabric. Make sure you match your seams. You match the dart line like that. So you pin the lining down to the fabric. like so. Then you stitch with your 1/2 inch allowance. So this is it after stitching. I'm going to make notches all around like that, so that when I turn it to the right side, it can lay very well. So this is it. This is how it looks on the right side. Then I'm also going to top stitch the fabric to the lining, like so. Just make sure you keep your yoke out of the way when doing that. Then I'm also going to stitch the side fabric to lining with 1/2 inch, like so. So this is what I have after doing all that, and I turn to the right side. You can see how it looks. So I'm going to set this aside and work on the back. So the first thing I'm going to do for the back pattern is to go ahead and stitch up the darts. I'm going to stitch my darts, fabric separately, lining separately. This is it after stitching up the darts. Next thing I'll do is to place my lining piece on the fabric, right side facing each other. Then I'm going to stitch up the neckline with 1/2 inch, the zipper line 1/2 inch, and the side seam also with 1/2 inch. I'll do the same thing to the second part also. So this is what I have after stitching up. I turned it to the right side and I ironed it flat. So the next thing I'll do now is to join my shoulders. I'll join the front and the back at the shoulder. I'm going to place the back shoulder in between the fabric and the lining of the front shoulder, like so. I'm going to sandwich them in between, and I'll stitch that up with 1/2 inch allowance. I'll do the same thing to the other side also. I'm going to stitch with 1/2 inch allowance. Then I'll finish the side seam also with 1 inch side seam allowance. Remember, we left 1.5 inches for the side seam, but we already turned with lining with 1/2 inch, so we are left with 1 inch. So we'll stitch up the sides with 1 inch allowance. So this is what I have after joining my shoulders and the side seam, and I also gave it a good press. You can see how nice it looks like. So I'm going to set this aside and I'll work on the sleeve part. So for the sleeve part, I went ahead to fold my fabric into 4. I'll be cutting both sleeves at once. So what I have here on fold is 1/2 of my armhole measurement plus extra 6 inches. That is what I placed on fold. So the first thing I'll do is to mark my 6 inches, like so. From the folded edge, I'm going to mark 6 inches downward. That is like the extra allowance for my puff sleeve. So what I have left here is 1/2 of my armhole measurements plus 1 inch for seam allowance. So from the open edge there, I came down by 5 inches from the starting line. That's my cap's height. So from the straight line there, I'm going to make a curve to meet with the cap height, like you see me doing, just like an S shape to meet the cap's height. And that is all. It's just as simple as that. Then I'm going to cut that out, like so. The length of the sleeve I have here is 13 inches. The normal sleeve length I'm working with is 10 inches, so I added extra 3 inches for the puffy effect. So I'm going to fold the down part of my sleeve 1/2 inch twice, and I'm going to pass my elastic through the casing, after which I'm going to close the side seam with 1 inch allowance, and I will gather up the upper part into my sleeve, and that will be all. So this is it after fixing my puff sleeve. You can see how beautiful our top is coming out already. So the next thing we are going to work on is the down part of the dress, which is the 360-degree flare with pockets. So we will be making some calculations for this. To get the radius of our skirts, we are going to divide the waist circumference by 6.28. In this case, the waist circumference I'm working with is 37 inches. I will be adding 2 inches allowance to the waist circumference. The reason why we are adding this allowance is because they will be joining on both sides of the skirt because of the pockets. So the 2 inches is serving as an allowance to join both front and back together. So that will be 39 inches in total. I will divide that by 6.28. So when I did that, I have about 6.210. So all I did was to approximate that, and I got 6.25 inches. So the radius of my skirt will be 6.25 inches. So to know how we are going to fold our fabric so as to avoid wastage, what I'm going to do is to add the length of my flare to the radius of my flare. The total length of the dress I'm making is 42 inches. So to get the length of my flare, I'm going to deduct my half length from the 42 inches. So when I removed my half length of 17 inches, what I have left is 25 inches. So that will be the length of my flare. So the length of my flare is 25 inches. So to know what to fold, I'm going to add the length and the radius together. When I added them together, I have 31.25. So that will be what to fold on fabric. So I've gone ahead to cut my fabric. I cut separate piece for the front and for the back. What I have on fold for each is 31.25. But to be on the safer side, I added extra 2 inches to that. So I cut out about 33 inches. So what I have on fold for each is 33 inches. I set aside the back piece and I'll work on the front. From the open edge there, I'm going to fold my fabric over to meet the folded edge like so. I'll fold it in a triangle form like that. So I placed my tape measure on the starting line like so. Then I'll measure and mark the 31.25 inches. So I added extra 1 inch to that for hemming the down part. So what I'm marking there is 32.25. So I kept rotating the measuring tape and I marked 32.25. So all I'm doing now is to connect the lines to have a perfect curve. So after doing that, I'm going to mark my radius. My radius is 6.25. So from the starting line, I marked 6.25. So I kept marking the 6.25 like so, and I connected the points together. So while cutting, I won't be cutting directly on the radius line. I'm going to come up ½ inch above the radius line. Reason why I'm doing this is to avoid excess on the waistline, because if I should cut directly on the radius line, there will be excess on the waistline. So with this is like the allowance to join to the waistline. So I'm going to be cutting ½ inch above the radius line like so. Then I'll cut out the length also. So this is what I have. Then I'll cut out the back piece also. To cut out the back piece, I won't be folding my fabric in a bias form. The fabric is folded into 2 equal halves. So from the folded edge here, I'm going to mark my 1 inch zipper allowance. So I'll mark 1 inch all the way down and I'll connect that into a straight line. So that is my 1 inch zipper allowance. So I'm going to place my front piece on the back piece. Now the front piece is now on a fold of 2, not 4 anymore. So I'm just going to place it like so. I'll place the front on the back. So it was like this when we drafted. It was folded into 4 like this. Now we've opened it up and it's on a fold of 2. So we'll place the fold on the zipper allowance line. the folded edge is directly on the line we draw for our zipper allowance line. So we have our 1 inch zipper allowance there. So we are going to cut this out now. So I'm going to cut out the radius and the length like so. Then I slashed open the back pattern to have 2 separate pieces. So I slashed it open like so. So this is what we have. I have the front and the 2 back pieces. Now I'm going to mark where I'm going to fix my pocket. So on the side here, I came down by 1/2 inch. I marked the 1/2 inch for joining. So from the 1/2 inch mark, I marked 2 inches. So that is where my pocket is going to start from. I'm going to notch that point so it can reflect on all the 4 sides. For my pocket, I cut 4 pieces of fabric. The width is 8 inches and the length is 10 inches. Then I made a curve on one side like so. I just chose one corner and I made a curve. Then I'm going to cut that out. So that is it for my pocket. Now I'll start joining my skirt now. So I'm going to open up my skirt like so. Then I'll place my pockets on it. Right side facing right side. Starting from the notched point, I'm going to place my skirt. The straight side is facing the waistline while the curvy side is facing the hem of the skirt. So I'm going to stitch that up with my 1 inch side seam allowance. I'm going to do that to the second side also. I'll place my pocket starting from the notched point like so, and I will stitch that up with 1 inch allowance. I'll do the same thing to the back piece also. So this is what I have after fixing my pockets to the skirt. So the next thing I'll do now is to place the back piece on the front piece, right side facing each other like so. I'm going to pin that down like so. Then I'll stitch the sides with 1 inch allowance like so. When I get to the pocket, I'll come in by 1/2 inch and stitch the pocket with 1/2 inch. Then I'll come out by 1 inch and I'll stitch down like so. I'll do the same thing to the second side also. I'll place the back on the front and I'm going to stitch the sides like so. So this is it after stitching up. I had to place it on fold because it was just too wide for my table. So I had to put it on fold so you can see it properly. So the next thing I'll do now is to join this to the upper part of my dress. What I'll do is to notch the center of the skirt like so, and I'll notch the center of the bodice also. I'll notch the center point also. Then I'm going to place my flare right side facing right side of the bodice. I'm going to match them up at the center point. I'm going to use my pins to hold that down at the center. I'll match the side seam also. I'll match the side seam of the skirt with the side seam of the top like so. I'm going to use my pins to hold that down. And I'm going to stitch that up with my 1/2 inch allowance all the way around. I'm going to stitch that down. So this is what I have after stitching up the skirt to my top. Then the next thing I'll do is to fold it over like so, right side facing each other, and I'll mark where my zipper is going to stop. So my zipper will be stopping about 7 inches from my waistline. So I'm going to place my tape on the waistline and I marked 7 inches. So from that point that my zipper is going to stop, I'm going to stitch down with my 1 inch allowance. And I'm going to fix my zipper to the zipper allowance line like so. Then I'm going to hem the down part of my dress also 1/2 inch twice. And that will be all for this dress. So this is the final outcome of my dress. You can see how beautiful it looks like. I hope you found this video helpful. Please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. And also put on your notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.